He was forced to marry the janitor's daughter. Years later, everyone wanted to be him. The son who had it all, Logan Hayes had never heard the word no. Born into the dazzling glass-walled empire of Hayes Industries, he lived a life where everything was within reach. His father, Edward Hayes, was a self-made billionaire, the type of man who built steel with his bare hands and then used it to raise skyscrapers, from private jets to penthouses in 3 countries. Logan had known luxury the way most people knew gravity, constant, invisible, and taken for granted. He was the kind of man people envied at first glance, 6'1" athletic build, tailored suits that fit like second skin, and a smile that disarmed even the most hardened negotiators. But beneath the surface was a boy who never had to earn anything. The money had always been there, the respect was bought, the women came easy, the parties never ended. And consequences. Logan didn't believe in those. Edward, however, believed in consequences. He had watched his son spiral from charming teenager to reckless adult. The final straw came on a night that would forever change their family's legacy. It was a gala at the city's most prestigious hotel. Edward was being honored for his contributions to urban development. CEOs, mayors, and senators were in attendance. But while Edward delivered a poised, heartfelt speech, Logan was in a suite upstairs throwing a party of his own. One that ended with a hotel room destroyed, a PR nightmare, and a social media scandal that trended for all the wrong reasons. The next morning, Edward didn't yell. He didn't threaten. He simply sat across from Logan at the breakfast table, poured himself a cup of black coffee, and said, "You're getting married." Logan laughed.
To a trust fund princess from the Forbes list, Edward looked him dead in the eyes. To the janitor's daughter, the silence that followed was volcanic. Logan stared at his father, waiting for the punchline. When it never came, his scoff turned to disbelief. "You're joking. You need structure, you need humility, and frankly, you need someone who's lived in the real world. So you want me to marry some cleaning lady. Her name is Elena. She's finishing her degree while working 2 jobs and caring for her mother. She's everything you are not." Logan slammed his coffee down. "Oh man, this is insane. You can't make me marry someone. I can, Edward replied, unflinching, "because as of today, the board has voted to transfer full voting control of Hayes Industries to me until you prove you're fit to inherit it. You want your legacy, you earn it. This marriage is the first step." It was blackmail, pure and simple. But Logan knew better than to argue. Edward didn't bluff. The news spread like wildfire in high society circles. Whispers echoed through boardrooms and backrooms. A billionaire's son marrying a janitor's daughter. Competitors chuckled. Investors raised eyebrows. Logan's friends texted him links to gossip blogs with headlines like "From Maserati to Mop Bucket, Logan Hayes' sudden engagement." Shocks the city. Logan felt humiliated. Cornered, furious, and Elena, she hadn't even said yes yet. Elena Rivera had no idea that her life was about to be turned upside down. Working the early morning shift at Hayes Tower, she kept her head down, and her AirPods in cleaning floors wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills. Her mother's medical expenses didn't wait for scholarships or kindness. When Mr. Hayes himself asked to speak to her privately, she assumed she'd accidentally breached some executive rule, but his proposal wasn't about cleaning schedules. "I want to offer you an opportunity," Edward said, leaning forward in the private conference room. "It's unconventional, but it will change your life." He told her everything, the contract, the arrangement, the stakes. It wasn't romantic, it wasn't even polite, it was business, cold, calculated, and strangely honest. Elena sat in stunned silence. "Why me?" "Because you're smart, grounded, and you know how to survive. I need someone who won't crumble under the pressure of my son's arrogance. And what if I say no? Then I'll thank you for your time and you'll never hear from me again." It wasn't coercion. It was a choice, but it was the kind of choice only someone desperate would have to make. Elena thought about her mother, about the eviction notice sitting in their kitchen drawer, about the scholarships that never came through. She thought about how tired she was of fighting alone. She took a deep breath. I'll do it." And just like that, 2 lives headed in opposite directions were about to collide in a way that would shake everyone. Watching the billionaire's son, the janitor's daughter, a marriage neither of them wanted, a transformation no one saw coming. The janitor's daughter, Elena Martinez never thought her name would one day be associated with anything other than resilience. Growing up in a forgotten neighborhood on the city's edge, she had learned early what it meant to fend for yourself. Her father, Diego Martinez, had been a janitor at Grayson Industries, the empire built by billionaire Edward Grayson for over 2 decades. He never complained, not once. Not when he worked overtime without pay, not when his knees gave out, and certainly not when people looked right through him like he wasn't even there. Elena inherited that quiet strength. She was 23, sharp as a blade and more focused than most people, twice her age.
By day, she worked as a campus custodian at the local college. By night, she took classes in finance and supply chain logistics. Her dream was clear. She wanted to build something that would outlive her, something that would make her father proud, and not just a degree, but a life worth remembering. What set Elena apart wasn't just her work ethic, it was how she carried herself. She had a calm dignity that drew people in without her even trying. Despite her janitor's uniform, she never slouched. She stood tall, spoke respectfully, and looked everyone in the eye. She didn't need anyone's approval. She already had her own. Yet beneath that quiet strength, life was far from easy. Her mother had passed away when Elena was only 12, leaving a hole in her chest that no amount of ambition could ever fill. Since then, it had been just her and her father, one paycheck away from losing everything. Diego had sacrificed his health to provide for his daughter, and now it was Elena's turn to return the favor. His heart was weak, his medications were expensive. She skipped meals to pay for them. She worked 2 jobs to make sure rent was always on time, and still she studied because her dream was not negotiable. One rainy Thursday morning, Elena arrived at Grayson Tower to fill in for a regular janitor who had called out sick. She didn't expect anything different. It was just another building, just another shift. She clocked in at 5:45 a.m., mopped the grand marble floors, cleaned the glass elevators, and restocked the executive restrooms. She worked in silence, earbuds in, listening to lectures on supply chain efficiency. It was during this shift that Edward Grayson first noticed her. He had come in early as usual and found Elena quietly dusting a large framed photo of the Grayson family. She didn't notice him at first. She was focused, careful not to leave any streaks on the glass. It was the way she handled the task, methodical, almost reverent, that made him stop. "You don't miss a spot, do you?" he said flatly, hands in his pockets, startled. Elena removed her earbuds and turned. "I'm sorry, sir. I didn't see you." "That's good," Edward replied, stepping closer. "It means you're doing your job." Elena was prepared for him to walk away, but he didn't. He watched her for a moment, then asked, "What's your name?" "Elena Martinez." He raised an eyebrow. "Martinez? Any relation to Diego Martinez?" "Yes, sir. He's my father." Edward nodded slowly. "He's been with us a long time." "Quiet man. Works hard." Elena smiled. "That's him." There was a pause. "You're in school?" he asked. "Yes, I study at night. I'm majoring in supply chain logistics." Another nod. "Well," Edward said, turning to leave, "make sure you clean the corners." "People forget the corners." "Yes, sir." That short exchange should have meant nothing. But something about Elena stayed in Edward's mind. There was a groundedness in her that reminded him of himself in the early days. And when he learned her full story, her background, her academic discipline, her father's condition, it stirred something deeper. Edward had built an empire with men and women who knew how to fight for what they believed in. Elena, in his eyes, was exactly that kind of fighter. Over the next week, he had her background vetted, not because he distrusted her, but because he needed to be absolutely sure. Everything checked out, no debts, no criminal history, no red flags, just a hard-working young woman doing everything she could to keep her father alive and her dream intact. And then came Logan's latest scandal, the drunken street race in a Bentley with 3 other spoiled trust fund kids caught on camera, going viral within hours. Edward was done, not just with Logan's recklessness, but with the environment that enabled it, the friends, the girlfriends, the useless hangers-on who whispered in his son's ears but disappeared the moment consequences arrived. Edward didn't want to punish Logan. He wanted to force him to grow, and for that he needed someone with grit, not glamour. Someone real. That someone was Elena. Elena was cleaning the executive floor hallway when Edward approached her again, this time with a tone that carried more gravity. "I need to speak with you, Elena, privately." She followed him into his office, unsure of what to expect. The room was imposing, glass walls, bookshelves lined with industry awards, a view that overlooked the entire skyline. "I'm going to say something that will sound absurd," he began, "and I ask that you listen until I finish." Elena nodded slowly. "Okay, I have a son. His name is Logan. He's lost, irresponsible, arrogant. He's never worked a day in his life, but one day he'll inherit a fortune, and frankly, I'm terrified of what he'll do with it." He paused, studying her reaction. She was unreadable. "I need someone to change him, to challenge him, to humble him, to wake him up, and that someone is me." She asked, incredulous. "Yes." Silence filled the room. "Elena," he said softly, "I'm asking you to marry my son." Shock, resistance, and the weight of sacrifice. The words hit Elena like a slap. Her first instinct was to leave, to tell him he was insane. Marriage. To a spoiled heir she'd never met. "For what money? I'm not for sale." "Mr. Grayson," she said, her voice steady, "I'm not offering to buy you," Edward replied. "I'm offering you a deal, 1 year. You live with him, you challenge him, and you walk away with a future." Your degree fully paid, your mother's surgery covered, a trust fund for your father's care, no strings attached. After that, Elena's hands trembled. Her mother had been on a transplant waitlist for 6 months. Her father was missing shifts. Their landlord had already started leaving notices. And yet, this is manipulation, she whispered. Edward didn't argue. Maybe, or maybe it's two people helping each other get what they need. Think about it, then decide. That night, Elena sat by her father's bedside watching him sleep. The machines beeped steadily, bills sat unopened on the counter, her textbooks lay unread, her dreams paused. She closed her eyes. I don't want to marry a stranger, she thought, but I don't want to bury my father either. The proposal. Elena had spent the entire night awake. Her textbooks remained unopened on the desk, her work apron still draped over the back of a chair, and her eyes fixed on the ceiling of the small bedroom she shared with her ailing mother. The doctor's words echoed in her mind. Without the operation, her condition will continue to decline. The surgery was urgent, necessary, but impossibly expensive. Morning light seeped through the blinds when her phone vibrated. It was a message from the Hayes Tower security desk. Mr. Edward Hayes has requested a private meeting with you. Please report to his office at 8 a.m. Her pulse quickened. He had spoken to her briefly before, but nothing beyond small talk. She thought back to the strange look he'd given her the last time they met, the kind of expression that weighed and measured you without words. Was she being fired? Had she unknowingly done something wrong? She didn't have time to overthink it. She changed quickly, ran a comb through her thick brown hair, and left the apartment with a granola bar in her pocket. Her father used to say, "When the world calls, answer it, standing tall." She tried to remember that now. At 7:58, she knocked on the heavy door to the executive suite. "Come in," a deep voice called. Inside, Edward Hayes stood by the massive floor-to-ceiling window overlooking the city skyline. He didn't turn to greet her right away. Instead, he gestured to the leather chair across from his desk. "Please sit." Elena hesitated but obeyed. The room was silent, the air thick with unspoken tension. Edward finally turned. "Thank you for coming." "You asked," she replied softly, clasping her hands in her lap. He studied her. Calm, controlled, but her eyes, tired and guarded, betrayed a storm beneath the surface. "I won't waste your time," he began. "I know about your mother's condition. I know the cost of the operation. I know about your classes, your 2 jobs, and your dreams. I know all of it." Elena's back stiffened. "How I had you vetted." She blinked, unsure if she should feel violated or grateful. "I don't mean to offend," he continued, "but I needed to understand the full picture before making you an offer." She leaned forward slightly. "What kind of offer?" Edward inhaled. "I want you to marry my son." Silence. Not the stunned kind that came with surprise, but the type that made time feel like it had stopped altogether. "You want me to what?" "Marry Logan for 1 year." Elena stood immediately. "This is some kind of joke." "I'm sorry, it's not a joke." "Please sit." Let me explain." No. Against every fiber of logic in her body. She sat. Again. Edward continued. "My son was on a destructive path. Spoiled, reckless, arrogant. He's never worked a day in his life. Never seen pain. Never had to choose between groceries and rent. I've tried every method, discipline, reward, shame, nothing works. And you think marrying me will fix that? I think proximity to someone like you, someone real, might force him to face what life actually is." Her laugh was bitter. "You want me to be a human rehab program?" Edward didn't flinch. "You have values, Elena, discipline, empathy. You've lived a life he could never imagine. I believe that exposure to you, living with you, seeing your strength might finally spark something inside him." "This is insane," she said, standing again. "You want me to sacrifice my life to play wife to a man I don't know who doesn't even want to be married." "Yes," Edward said simply. "In exchange, I'll pay for your mother's surgery, cover the rest of your education, set up a trust fund in your name. After 1 year, you walk away, debt-free, degree in hand. And your mother healthy." Elena stared at the floor. "I know it sounds cruel," he added, "transactional. But we both know that life rarely affords us luxury through fairness. I'm offering you an unfair advantage in return for something neither of us can buy, change." She didn't respond for a long time. Edward continued, his voice softening. "You can say no if you do. I'll never bring this up again. You'll keep your job. I'll never pressure you, but if you say yes, you won't regret it." Elena's mind spiraled. She saw her mother's pale face, the unpaid hospital bills, the nights she spent crying in secret, so her mother wouldn't hear. She also saw the man sitting across from her, powerful, cold, but oddly sincere, and she saw Logan, the billionaire's son she'd only seen from afar. Posing in magazines, partying in tabloids, flashing arrogance like cologne. The thought of being tied to someone like that married to him made her stomach churn. But the thought of burying her mother because she couldn't afford one more medical bill, that was worse. She finally asked Will, "You know this is arranged?" "Yes, he already does." "And what if he refuses?" Edward's jaw tensed. "He won't because his inheritance depends on it. And if I agree, will I be safe?" "You will be under my protection at all times." She walked toward the window, pressed her palm against the glass. The city below looked so far away. All her life she'd been climbing inch by inch. Now someone was offering her a lift to the next level, on a ladder she didn't choose. When would it happen? This week? So soon? If we delay, Logan will resist more. He thrives on delay, on excuses. She turned to face him. "You said, after 1 year, I walk away. No obligations. I want that in writing. I want legal counsel. My own." "You'll have it." She nodded slowly, then exhaled deeply. "I can't believe I'm saying this, but yes, I'll do it." Edward didn't smile. He didn't gloat. He simply stood and extended his hand. "Thank you." She didn't shake it. "I'm not doing this for you or him. This is for my mother." He nodded, understood, and with that the deal was sealed. 3 days later, Elena stood in a borrowed designer gown, her hands trembling as she faced Logan Hayes for the first time. Up close, he looked even more indifferent than the photos. Sharp jaw, expensive cologne, and the unmistakable posture of a man being forced into something he thought beneath him. "You're the girl," he said flatly, not even pretending to be charming. "And you're the boy," she replied with equal disdain. The ceremony was brief, a private affair, just the two of them, Edward, a notary, and 2 witnesses, one of them being the family lawyer. When the officiant said, "You may now kiss the bride," both parties shook their heads. "No thanks," Elena muttered. Everyone laughed awkwardly. That night, they returned to a luxury apartment that Edward had pre-arranged. It had 2 bedrooms, separate bathrooms, and enough coldness to rival an iceberg. "This is where we'll pretend to be married?" Logan asked, tossing his coat on the couch. "I'm not pretending anything," Elena replied. "I'm here for 1 year. You stay out of my way. I'll stay out of yours." He scoffed. "Don't flatter yourself. I'm not interested in playing house." She opened the guest room door. "Good, neither am I." They didn't speak again that night. The next morning, Elena woke to find Logan gone. A note on the counter read, "Don't touch my stuff." She rolled her eyes and started her day. Over the weeks that followed, they became something akin to roommates, polite when necessary, distant otherwise. She cooked her own meals, took care of her studies, kept herself occupied, and Logan, he part-eyed, traveled, ignored her existence. But something strange began to happen. Every now and then he'd come home early, ask how her classes were going, notice if she looked tired. Once she found a bouquet of lilies on the table. No note, just the flowers she mentioned once were her mother's favorite. Another time when she got a late-night call that her mother had collapsed. Logan drove her to the hospital himself. Didn't say a word, just sat with her in silence. He wasn't always cold, and she wasn't always resentful. Something was shifting, but neither of them dared speak it aloud. Not yet, because underneath the contract, beneath the bitterness and beyond the bargain, was something still too raw, too uncertain to name. They had made a deal, but fate had made other plans. Marriage without love. Logan Hayes had been to 100 weddings, but none felt as surreal as his own. He didn't remember the vows, didn't remember the way the judge looked at them when they refused to kiss. What he did remember was the feeling of his throat closing up when Elena said "I do" in a voice so calm, so composed, as if she were signing a lease, not pledging her life to someone she didn't love. The car ride home was silent. Edward had insisted they move into the luxury high-rise apartment he bought for them, equipped with every modern convenience, but to Logan it felt more like a cage, a penthouse prison. And Elena, she was the unexpected cellmate. He watched her walk ahead of him into the marble-tiled foyer. Her shoulders squared, her steps unhurried. She took off her heels by the door and carried them in one hand like a schoolgirl returning from a long day. "You can have the master bedroom," she said flatly, not turning around. "I'll take the guest room. I didn't ask." Logan snapped. She turned slightly, her expression neutral. "You didn't have to," and just like that, she disappeared into the guest wing, closing the door behind her without another word. Logan stared at the space she had just vacated. She hadn't begged for anything, not even acknowledged him as a husband. No crying, no pleading, no gold-digger theatrics. Just cool, steady grace, and somehow that irritated him more. The first week of married life passed like fog. Logan spent most of his time outside the apartment, partying, drinking, letting his friends in on the ridiculous contract his father had forced him into. "She's just a cleaning girl," he laughed one night at a rooftop bar. "She's got a mop and a martyr complex." His friends howled with laughter. "Seriously, bro," one of them said. "Your dad's savage.
Making you marry a maid."
You're gonna get your inheritance though, right?" Logan lifted his glass eventually. "1 year, then I'm free." But the laughter rang hollow in his ears. The more he talked about it, the less funny it seemed. At her home, Elena remained invisible. She left early each morning, came back late after her classes and tutoring shifts. She cooked her own meals, washed her own clothes, and never asked for help. Logan sometimes wondered if she was secretly building a case to leave him early, but when he checked with the family lawyer, the contract was still in place. She hadn't even tried to change a clause. He also noticed strange things, like how she always left one light on in the hallway so the place wouldn't feel empty when he came home, or how she never used the fancy dishwasher, insisting on cleaning each dish by hand, or how every Sunday she video called her mother and spoke in soft Spanish that reminded him of warmth he hadn't felt in years. Still, he remained distant. When they did speak, it was brief and transactional. "You left the oven on. Sorry, there's mail for you, thanks. Your tie's on the floor, leave it." She always did. But one night, things shifted. Logan came home early for once. He had skipped drinks with the usual crowd, his head pounding from the night before. The apartment was quiet. Too quiet. He passed the kitchen, intending to grab a soda, when he heard something faint like crying. Following the sound, he paused at the edge of the hallway and looked toward the guest room. The door was slightly ajar. Inside, Elena sat on the edge of her bed, holding a crumpled medical form in one hand and her phone in the other. Her shoulders shook. He didn't mean to eavesdrop, but he couldn't look away. "No, mamá," she whispered. "No tienes que preocuparte. Voy a arreglarlo. Te lo prometo." A pause. Tears rolled down her cheeks, but she didn't wipe them. She just sat there holding her pain like it was something sacred. Logan backed away before she could notice him. The next morning, she was back to normal. "Come collected polite coffee?" she asked as he wandered into the kitchen, shirtless and grumpy. He blinked. "You made me coffee. I made coffee. It's there, if you want it." He poured himself a mug and took a sip. It was strong. "Good." He wasn't sure why that annoyed him more, He said casually, "You don't have to pretend to be the perfect wife. No one's watching." "I'm not pretending anything," she replied without looking up from her notes. "I'm just living here like you." Over the next few weeks, they shared more awkward silences and colder mornings, but something small began to thaw. One evening, Logan came home to find Elena sitting on the couch wrapped in a blanket, watching a documentary about urban farming. "You like this kind of stuff?" he asked, tossing his jacket onto a chair. "It's for my sustainability course," she said. "But yeah, I think it's interesting. Plants are boring. They feed you." He smirked. "Touché." He sat across from her, opened a beer, and watched with half interest. 20 minutes later, he was still watching. At the end of the episode, he asked, "Do you really want to run your own business someday?" She glanced at him, surprised. "Yeah." "Why?" He shrugged. "You just seem too practical. That's why I'll be good at it." He didn't argue later. He found himself Googling urban farming. Slowly, walls began to lower. One night, the power went out during a thunderstorm. Elena lit candles and made ramen on the gas stove. They ate together at the dining table for the first time. "You ever been camping?" Logan asked. "Does poverty count?" He laughed, really laughed for the first time in weeks. She smiled. It didn't last. There were still arguments. Still cold shoulders, but now there were moments in between, slivers of curiosity, shared glances, accidental laughter. One morning, Logan caught himself looking for her before he left for a meeting. She was in the kitchen humming a Spanish lullaby. He stood in the doorway and watched. She looked up. "What, nothing," he said quickly. "Just, you're a good singer." She blushed slightly, then turned back to her tea, and Logan left for work feeling lighter. Meanwhile, whispers continued to circulate. At charity events, old friends mocked him in hushed tones. Logan Hayes married the janitor's daughter. What's next? A career in recycling. But Logan didn't laugh anymore when someone called her a gold digger at a gala. Logan coldly replied, She has more integrity than anyone in this room. People started watching more closely. The girl from nowhere who wore thrifted dresses and corrected economic fallacies in public forums was suddenly more compelling than any socialite, and Logan, he was changing. Not because he was trying to, but because he couldn't help it. One night, he came home to find Elena asleep on the couch, a book resting on her chest. Her mouth was slightly open, her hair fell over her face in loose curls. He covered her with a blanket, gently took the book from her hands and paused. It was a book on business negotiations. She was studying, still working, still pushing forward despite everything. He walked into his room and sat on the edge of his bed, hands running through his hair. She wasn't supposed to matter, but she did, and he didn't know what to do with that. Small steps, big changes. The city had always been Logan Hayes' natural habitat: glass towers, leather seats, and espresso in crystal cups. But all of that disappeared in one boardroom decision and a father's command. Edward Hayes had delivered the verdict with all the finality of a court order. "You're moving to the countryside. You need to learn what real life is." Logan had protested, of course, loudly, indignantly, with every ounce of ego he could summon. But his inheritance was now legally tied to this new phase. If he didn't comply, everything, his trust fund, access to family accounts, even the penthouse, would vanish. So 1 week later, Logan and Elena arrived at a small quiet town 2 hours from the city. They moved into a modest house with peeling paint, creaky floorboards, and a backyard that hadn't been mowed in months. There were no doormen, no elevators, no valet, just gravel roads and neighbors who waved with genuine smiles. Logan hated it. The first morning, the rooster crowed at 5:30 a.m. "Tell me that's someone's ringtone," he mumbled from under the blanket. Elena, already dressed in jeans and a sweatshirt, sipped her coffee at the kitchen table. "Nope. It's the countryside calling. I hate the countryside. Give it time," she replied with maddening calm. She wasn't fazed. She adjusted quickly, grocery shopping with a list, talking to the locals like she'd lived here forever, setting up her corner desk to continue her online studies. Meanwhile, Logan sulked. He refused to unpack, he refused to clean. When Elena handed him a broom, he looked at it like it was a foreign object. "I hire people to do this." "Not here," she replied. That first week, Logan was a disaster. He couldn't cook, didn't know how to use the washing machine, and managed to flood the bathroom, trying to fix a leaky pipe. But Elena didn't yell. She just sighed, handed him a mop, and said, "Learn, and slowly." He did. It started with small steps. One morning, Logan made toast without burning it. Another day, he folded laundry badly, but with effort. He began going for walks around the neighborhood, nodding at the old man who always watered his garden at 7 a.m. He even helped a woman carry her groceries when her bags split outside the town store. People didn't recognize him as the billionaire's son here. He was just Logan, Elena's quiet husband, who looked too clean to be from around these parts. Then came the job. Edward had arranged it quietly through an old friend. A position at a local lumber yard. Manual labor, hard hats, real sweat. Logan showed up late the first day in designer sneakers and cologne. The foreman, a barrel-chested man named Gus, took one look at him and chuckled. "You'll last a week," Gus muttered. Logan lasted 10 minutes. His hands blistered. He dropped a beam on his foot. He almost passed out from lifting planks in the sun. When he returned home that night, he collapsed on the couch. Shirt, soaked muscles aching. Elena raised an eyebrow. "You okay? I'm dying." "No, you're working," he groaned, but didn't argue. By the end of the week, his hands were calloused. His body still ached, but less. He showed up on time. Listened, learned, and Gus stopped laughing. "You've got more in you than I thought, city boy." It wasn't praise, but to Logan it felt like a medal. Something began to shift. He started waking up before the rooster, made his own coffee, brushed off the dirt on his jeans like it belonged. There's Sue out there. He even started packing lunch for Elena on days she had class, slipping in post-it notes with terrible jokes. Why did the scarecrow win an award? Because he was outstanding in his field. She rolled her eyes when she found it. But she didn't stop smiling for the next hour. They still weren't a real couple. They still slept in separate rooms. But the coldness had thawed. Slowly, wordlessly, they talked more, shared meals, sometimes even watched the sunset from the porch side by side, saying nothing at all. And Logan noticed things. How Elena always offered to help neighbors even when she was exhausted. How she called her mom every night at 9 p.m. without fail. How she covered herself in a blanket before crying so no one would see. And how her laugh when it came lit up a room more than any chandelier ever had. One evening after dinner, Logan found her in the backyard tending to a small herb garden she had started. "You planted these?" he asked. "Yeah, basil, mint, a few tomatoes. Smells like pizza," he said, crouching beside her. She laughed. "That's the basil." He looked at her dirt on her hands, hair tied in a loose bun, and for the first time he didn't see the janitor's daughter. He just saw a woman, strong, steady, beautiful in a way no camera could capture. Something inside him stirred. The next day at work, Logan volunteered to help on a bigger project replacing the foundation beams of an old house. It was dangerous, back-breaking, but he didn't hesitate. That night, he came home limping, arms scratched, face smudged with dirt. Elena stood frozen in the doorway. What happened? He grinned, just saved a house. No big deal. She tried to scold him. You should clean that cut, only if Nurse Elena helps. She rolled her eyes but pulled out the first aid kit. As she cleaned the wound, her hands trembled slightly. He noticed. You worried about me. I'm worried you'll break something important and I'll be stuck explaining it to your dad. He chuckled. You protect me. Someone has to, she said, voice softer than usual. Their eyes met, long, lingering. He almost leaned in, but she stood up quickly. You need a shower. He didn't argue. Later that night, Logan stared at the ceiling in the dark, unable to sleep. He thought about everything he used to value. Money, power, prestige, and how little it meant now. He thought about Elena, her quiet strength, and how she never tried to impress anyone but everyone remembered her. And he thought about himself, the man he was becoming, the man he wanted to be. He got up, padded to the kitchen, and scribbled something on a scrap of paper. Then he slid it under Elena's door. She found it the next morning. It read, I used to think I had everything, but then I met you. Now I want to be worthy of it. She didn't say anything that day, but at dinner she set out a second bowl, and for the first time since their marriage began, she served him before serving herself. Logan didn't say a word, but inside something bloomed. It wasn't love yet, but it was close. The storm before the sunrise. The sky over the countryside had been moody for days, thick with clouds and warning winds. Elena, ever attentive, had warned Logan not to go out that morning. There's a storm coming, she said. Pouring him a cup of coffee, Gus said to stay put today, no one's working. But Logan had made a promise. Old Mr. Dobbins down the road, a widower with bad knees, had asked if someone could help fix the leaning barn wall before the next heavy rain. Logan had volunteered without hesitation. Just a few nails, he said. I'll be back before lunch. Elena watched him go with a strange sense of unease curling in her chest. By noon the winds had picked up, rain pelted the windows, and the sky had turned a ghostly grey. Elena paced the kitchen, checking her phone every few minutes. Then it came. A call from the town clinic. There had been an accident. When Elena burst through the sliding glass doors of the small rural hospital, her heart thudded in her ears like a war drum. Her hands trembled as she gave Logan's name to the nurse. He's stable, the nurse said, guiding her to the room. A wooden beam collapsed. He took the brunt of it on his shoulder and back, concussion, a few cracked ribs, but he's lucky he'll recover. Elena exhaled for the first time in hours. She stepped into the room quietly. Logan lay unconscious, hooked to an ivy face, pale against the white pillow. His hair was damp, his lip cut, and his right arm bandaged heavily. A monitor beeped softly beside him. She pulled a chair close and sat down. Without thinking, she reached out and took his hand. It was warm, strong despite everything. You idiot, she whispered, tears stinging her eyes. Always trying to prove something. She stayed through the night. When Logan awoke the next morning, his vision was blurred. The first thing he saw was a dark blur leaning over him, Elena. She looked up surprised. Hey, she said softly. You're awake? His voice was hoarse. What happened? You got caught in the storm. A beam hit you. You've been out for almost 24 hours. He closed his eyes again. Did I mess up the barn? She chuckled through a choked sob. You could have died, and that's what you're worried about. He smiled faintly. Just wanted to help. She stood. Get some rest. I'm not going anywhere. The following weeks blurred together. Elena became his nurse, his shadow, and his stubborn cheerleader. She cooked, changed bandages, helped him shower, and even read to him when he couldn't sleep. Logan was quiet at first, embarrassed to be so helpless, but soon he began to open up. He told her about his childhood, about the loneliness that came with money, about how he always felt like he was living someone else's version of success. And Elena listened. She told him stories about her mother, her dreams of owning a wellness cafe someday, and her fears, ones she never shared with anyone before. Their bond deepened not in fireworks, but in quiet, enduring light. One night, as she adjusted the pillows behind his back, he caught her hand. Elena, he said, his voice steady now. I don't think I've ever really loved anyone before. She froze. But I know this, he continued. The thought of not seeing you each day scares me. The way you look at the world, the way you looked at me when I didn't deserve it. It changed me. Her lips parted, but no words came out. I love you, he said simply. She pulled her hand back gently, eyes glistening. Logan, you don't have to say that. You've been through a lot. You're emotional. No, he said, I've been blind. And now I see clearly. When Logan could finally stand again, he insisted on walking without help into the kitchen to cook her breakfast. It was a mess: burnt eggs, crooked toast, and orange juice in a wine glass. She laughed, and he beamed like a boy winning his first medal. "I want to do things for you now," he said. "You've given so much, let me try." From that day, something new ignited in him. He called Gus and asked if he could return to work as soon as he was cleared. He dusted off his laptop and started writing a business proposal for a local materials supply business, using everything he'd learned from the lumberyard and his time with his father's firm. He reached out to Edward, not to ask for money, but to ask for advice. "I'm not coming back for the company, Dad," he said over the phone. "I just want to learn. I want to build something of my own. I want to be someone Elena can be proud of." Edward was silent on the other end, but when he finally spoke, his voice carried something Logan had never heard before: respect. By the time Logan fully recovered, the town barely remembered the spoiled rich boy who once scoffed at dirt and manual labor. He had become one of them. He volunteered at the community center, helped fix fences, and mentored local teens on small business planning. People began to say things like, "Logan's a good guy. I wouldn't have guessed it, but he's got heart." And Elena, she watched it all with quiet wonder. She still hadn't said "I love you," but she stayed. And Logan knew some storms don't destroy, some clear the path for sunrise. The day everything changed, Edward Hayes hadn't stepped foot in the countryside since he sent Logan there months ago. To him, the place was little more than a necessary battlefield, a training ground where his wayward son might finally be broken down and rebuilt. But truthfully, he hadn't expected much. Maybe a small improvement, a bit more humility, certainly not transformation. So when Edward's black SUV pulled up to the modest home surrounded by a freshly painted picket fence, he remained skeptical until he saw Logan step outside. His son stood on the porch, sleeves rolled up, jeans smudged with honest dirt, a hammer in one hand and a clipboard in the other. A local contractor walked beside him, nodding as they discussed the roof measurements. Edward paused. For a moment, he wasn't looking at the impulsive boy who once mocked effort. He was looking at a man, confident, focused, grounded. The contractor noticed Edward first and gave a polite nod before heading off. Logan turned, slightly confused by the presence of the luxury car. Then his eyes landed on his father. "Dad." Edward crossed his arms. "Inspecting the troops?" Logan smirked. "You're late. I've already built the outpost." They shook hands. No hugs, but something passed between them. Something solid. Inside the house, the transformation was just as striking. The floors were polished. The walls were painted in soft earth tones. A small bookcase displayed volumes on business architecture and sustainability. A corkboard on the wall was filled with project ideas, delivery schedules, and budget calculations. "This is your handwriting?" Edward asked, raising an eyebrow. Logan nodded. "All of it. Elena helped me organize it. I've been building a local sourcing business. Lumber tools, repairs for small contractors. I want to scale it across rural counties. There's demand. Most of them rely on delayed shipments from the city." Edward looked around again. "No team, just me and Elena, when she has time." As if summoned, Elena entered from the back, her hair in a messy bun, a clipboard in one hand and a basket of fresh herbs in the other. She paused when she saw Edward, then offered a polite smile. "Mr. Hayes, welcome." Edward nodded, but his eyes lingered on her. Something in her calm demeanor, how she wasn't trying to impress, struck him. "How's your mother?" Edward asked, surprising both of them. "She's recovering well. Thank you for asking," Elena replied gently. They sat at the kitchen table. Logan poured coffee, 1 sugar, no cream, the way his father liked it. Edward sipped, watched his son move with purpose, then leaned back. "You've changed." Logan shrugged. "I had to." Edward didn't respond right away. He just studied his son's face, how the boyish arrogance had faded, replaced by lines earned through effort and decisions growth. "What made you finally take it seriously?" he asked. Logan looked toward Elena, then back at his father. "I got tired of being ashamed." Word began to spread. Not through press releases or flashy parties, but through whispers in boardrooms and small-town meetings. "Did you hear what Edward Hayes' son is doing?" "Wait, the one who married the janitor's daughter?" "Yes, but apparently he's opened 3 regional supply centers, all profitable." "Really? That kid?" "I heard he built the whole business from scratch. No Hayes money, not a dime." The same competitors who once sneered at Logan now raised eyebrows in private. Some called it beginner's luck. Others speculated Edward had orchestrated the whole thing, but those closest to the family knew the truth. Logan had carved it out himself, one order, one client, or one long day at a time. And Elena was always there, balancing books, networking with local farmers, creating branding ideas that attracted eco-conscious investors. They were a team. At a statewide entrepreneurs forum, Logan was invited to speak. He almost didn't accept, but Elena encouraged him. "Don't let their old image of you define your worth," she said, fixing his collar. He took the stage in a gray suit, not designer, but tailored to fit a man who had earned the cut. The audience was filled with familiar faces. Edward's associates, rivals, former classmates who used to toast champagne while mocking his failures. But this time Logan didn't stutter. He spoke about building from the ground up, about failing fast and learning faster, about empathy in business and building trust with working communities. He ended his talk with a single line. "Sometimes you have to lose everything you think matters to discover what truly does." The applause was slow at first, then thunderous. Even Edward, sitting in the back row, stood. After the event, one of his longtime business rivals, Charles Bennett, approached with a smile too wide to be sincere. "Well, Edward," Charles said, clapping him on the back. "Looks like the joke's on us, huh?" Edward smirked. "I never doubted him," Charles laughed. "Oh, please. The janitor's daughter. We all thought he'd crash and burn. Now look at them." His gaze shifted toward the reception area where Logan and Elena stood talking to local reporters. Elena's hand gently touched Logan's shoulder as they spoke. "They look solid," Charles muttered. Edward nodded, eyes narrowing slightly. "They are." Later that night, back at their countryside home, Logan stood on the porch watching the stars. The sky was clear, the air still. Elena joined him, wrapping a blanket around her shoulders. "You were amazing today," she said. He chuckled. "I was terrified you didn't show it." He turned to her. "I meant what I said." She nodded, her eyes thoughtful. "You really don't miss your old life?" she asked. Logan paused. No, not even a little. Everything I was chasing back then. It was noise. He reached for her hand. "No, but you, this us, it's real." She looked at him, eyes soft. "So what now?" He grinned. "Now I build a life that matches what you deserve." She leaned her head against his shoulder. "I think you're already doing it." A few weeks later, Edward sent over a formal letter. Inside was an offer partnership in the Hayes Group, a seat at the table. Logan didn't accept immediately. He brought it to Elena, spread it on the kitchen table. "What do you think?" he asked. She traced the edge of the paper with her finger. "You know the answer already." He did. That night he called Edward. "I'm not coming back to the company," he said, "but I'll consult. I'll help where I can on my terms." There was a long pause. Then Edward said, "I'm proud of you." Logan exhaled like he'd been holding his breath for years. "Thanks, Dad." That weekend the town hosted its annual Harvest Festival. Logan and Elena set up a small booth under a wooden sign that read, "Hayes and Fields Co-op," a collaboration between their business and local growers. Children ran past with caramel apples. Farmers shook Logan's hand. Elderly women complimented Elena's cinnamon rolls. In the middle of it all, Edward arrived unannounced, carrying a box of wine from his own cellar. "I figured it was time I joined the party," he said, placing the box on their table. "You sure about that?" Logan asked, raising an eyebrow. "There's no valet." Edward smirked. "I'll manage." The sun dipped low, casting a golden glow over the fairgrounds. Music played, laughter floated on the air, and for once Edward wasn't the center of power in the room. He was just a father. And as he watched Logan pull Elena into a spin on the dance floor, her laughter ringing out like wind chimes, he realized something. His son hadn't just changed, he had become the kind of man other men wanted to be. The legacy of love. The skyline of the city hadn't changed much. Glass towers still shimmered in the afternoon light, cars still rushed down wide boulevards. Coffee shops still overflowed with ambition and conversations layered with purpose. But this time, Logan Hayes returned to the city not as the entitled heir who once threw lavish parties and dismissed effort. He returned hand in hand with Elena, the woman who had taught him what real love, humility, and purpose looked like. They arrived not in a stretch limo, but in a practical black SUV they had purchased together. In the back seat were architectural blueprints, business proposals, and a basket of cinnamon muffins Elena had baked for their new team at the downtown branch. Logan stepped out. First holding the door for Elena. She smiled, still playing the gentleman. He winked. Every legacy needs a little class. Their new headquarters was a sleek mid-rise building in the heart of the city, nothing too flashy but thoughtfully designed local materials, energy-efficient systems, handcrafted signage that simply read, Hayes and Fields. Solutions that build people. Their business had grown. Yes, but so had their vision. They weren't just selling supplies anymore. They were mentoring aspiring entrepreneurs, launching training programs for youth in underserved communities, and offering affordable consulting to help small towns revitalize their economies. Their story had gone viral months ago, a former Playboy billionaire forced to marry a janitor's daughter, only to fall in love and build a business empire rooted in values. The media dubbed them the unlikely power couple, but those who knew them personally knew there was nothing unlikely about their bond anymore. It was built brick by brick on trust, pain, growth, and relentless love. On their first day back in the city, they hosted a community forum. Not a product launch, not a press conference, a simple public event where they sat on a panel with students, nonprofit leaders, and small business owners discussing resilience, leadership, and second chances. A girl from the audience, barely 18, raised her hand. What was the hardest part about falling in love with someone you didn't choose? She asked nervously. Elena glanced at Logan and they both smiled. The hardest part, Elena said, holding the microphone thoughtfully. Letting go of who I thought he was, Logan nodded. And for me, letting go of who I thought I had to be. The room was silent, then applause erupted. In the weeks that followed, Logan and Elena's influence only deepened. They didn't use their success to buy yachts or throw red carpet galas. Instead, they partnered with local colleges to offer business incubators for underserved youth. They funded women-led startups in rural towns. They hosted coffee with a founder, events in open public parks where anyone, students, janitors, young moms could sit across from Logan or Elena and ask for advice. They didn't sit on a pedestal. They walked among the people, and that's what made them magnetic. One afternoon, Logan stood alone on the balcony of their office watching the city hum below. Edward joined him, sipping his espresso. "You've come a long way, son," he said. Logan didn't look away from the view. "I still remember the day you threw me out here." Edward smirked. It wasn't exactly exile, more like rewilding. They both laughed. "I thought you were ruining me," Logan said. "But now I see you are handing me back to myself." Edward nodded. "And look what you built." Logan glanced over his shoulder where Elena was leading a workshop with interns in the conference room. Her eyes lit up as she spoke, hands animated, her voice calm but commanding. "She's the real foundation," he said softly. Edward watched her for a moment, then patted his son's shoulder. "I used to think legacy was about buildings and balance sheets. But now, I think it's about people. Relationships. What we leave behind in the hearts of others." Logan smiled. "Then we're just getting started." At home that night now, a bright penthouse filled with books, plants, and the scent of homemade food, Elena placed a framed photo on their bookshelf. It was the two of them at their very first community event in the countryside. Dirt on Logan's shirt, a sun hat on Elena's head, both smiling like they knew they had finally found something worth holding on to. Logan walked in, slipping his arms around her waist from behind. "Guess what?" he whispered. She tilted her head. "What? Our new scholarship program just got its 100th applicant." She turned in his arms, eyes wide. Already he nodded. "People are hungry for a second chance." She kissed his cheek. "Then let's keep giving them one." They never forgot their beginnings. Not the messy ones, not the painful ones, and certainly not the ones where they were still figuring out how to care for each other in silence. But that's what made their love legendary. It wasn't built on perfection, it was built on forgiveness, on work, on days when they didn't feel in love but chose to love anyway, and in choosing each other again and again, they created a legacy greater than wealth. They created a legacy of love.